thus saith the Lord, which maketh a way in the sea, and a path in the mighty waters. Verse 19, behold, I do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall you not know it? I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Isaiah chapter 35, reading from 1 to 10. The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. And it shall blossom abundantly and rejoice even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it, the excellency of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord and the excellency of our God. Strengthen you the weak hands, confirm the feeble knees. Say unto them that are of fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. Even God with a recompense, he will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap as a hart, and the tongue of the dumb sing. For in the wilderness shall waters break out, and streams in the desert. And the parched ground shall become a pool, and the thirsty land springs of water. In the habitations of dragons, where each lays, shall grass with reeds and rushes grow. And an highway shall be there and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for those, the wayfaring men. The fools shall not err therein. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous wolf's beast shall go thereon. It shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransom of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with songs, and everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. The words of God telling us that he is going to make a way through the wilderness, through the waters, through the seas, and through the desert. That is incredible. These words are coming to those that are the remnant in Babylon. But even as God spoke to those remnant, God is speaking to us in the 21st century. Let me remind you that even though we are not Babylonians, or we are not the remnants in the Babylon, but the word comes to us nevertheless, because like them, we do have our wilderness. And like the people of Israel in Egypt, we do have our Egypt. And like the children of Israel had to cross the Red Sea, we do have our Red Sea. And like the people of Israel, as they had to cross over to the new Canaan land, they had to cross River Jordan, we have our deep seas as well. Even though we cannot say that we have all the Red Sea, but we know that these are types, shadows, and symbols that reminds us that it's to us, we are in a vertible, so to speak, a metaphorus that simply is like a wilderness and like the sea and like the desert. That we have in our own way in this 21st century the same challenge as they face, the same situation and conditions that they have gone through. We go through that every day of our lives. And I would say this, that even as the Babylonian remnants that faced the ugly situations and challenges, and even as the children of Israel faced the terrible wrath of Pharaoh, we have an enemy. And it is far more than flesh and blood. It is powers and principalities. But I would say this, that what is so common denominator in all of the history is the God that saw the people and made a way for the children of Israel out of Egypt and out into the desert and through the rivers and into the promised land is the same God with us in this 21st century. Give the Lord a clap offering. When we say that he made a way for them, we are saying that he will make a way for us, because Jesus Christ, Hebrews chapter 13 verse 8, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Give God the glory and the honor and the praise. So we have something like 6 points. We won't be able to cover them all. But the first one is God will make a way through the wilderness. Your wilderness, my wilderness. Through the waters and the deep seas. And through the desert. I would say this, my friend, when you and I realize what God is doing, we recognize the awesomeness of His work and what He has done in our midst. You know, when you go into the Bible, you find that even as Isaiah chapter 43, verse 16 and verse 19, He's made a way. What He does is true. And many a times we come to that situation, as verse 1 says, when you pass through the waters, when you pass through the fire, when you pass through the floods, I will be with you. We have to pass through. As even Samuel, as the great psalmist says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we have to walk through the valley. And so we have a God who is with us. He never will leave us, as He was with the 3 Hebrew children through the fires. He will be with us in our own fire in today. So we come to this passage in Exodus chapter 13 and verse 17 and 18, but verse 18, that particularly how God led them, and verse 18 says, round about the way of wilderness of the Red Sea. And so the children of Israel went. To make it simple, what was a short journey made it long because they were not able to face the battles. And so God brought them through the wilderness, as Isaiah 43 and verse 19 says, by the way of the wilderness. Can you believe that God leads us through the wilderness? Wilderness are important. Almost all the great men and women in the Bible have been shaped and formed and fashioned by the wilderness. Wilderness should not be despised. Even Jesus Christ in Luke chapter 4 actually had to go through the wilderness because that is a challenge. But however, you find some of the greatest history and the greatest teachings that comes out of the wilderness experience. They were formed and shaped in the anvil of this fire and wilderness. When you turn to Exodus chapter 15, I want us to go through this passage, what happened to the people of Israel. In fact, in chapter 15, verse 1, the Song of Moses, something like 20 verses of powerful worship song. You know, in heaven, we're told that we'll be singing the song of Moses and of the Lamb. This is one of the songs of Moses. And he says, the Lord is my strength, verse 2. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is His name. And so in verse 7, the greatness of thine excellency and all of this, the enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake. Hey, the Lord gave us the victory. And so when you come to this 21, it says, and Miriam answered them, sing unto the Lord, for He has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath He thrown into the sea. Verse 22, Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea. They went out of the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. This high Sunday, and now comes Monday, they have to face the reality. High praise, high worship, testimonies. Miriam taking the timbrel and the others dancing. But the next day, there was no water. You face a demand as you go back to the world, as you go back to the business, as you go back to what would be out into the world. And there are challenges that we face today. Maybe not the water, but we run out of gas. We run out of our spiritual tank. We run out of what we could say, what we should say when we face such challenges. And so what is the reaction of the people of Israel? Murmur and complain. I don't think that we would be any more better. When you look in verse 23, and when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter, and therefore the name of it was called Marah. Have you been through that Marah experience? All of us will go through that. It is a terrible experience to find that what we thought was there, that was not part of our agenda, that was not part of our journal, that was not part of our prayer. But bang, right there, we hit a wall. Bang, right there, we hit a spot. And there we find there is no gas, there is no finance, there is no family, there is no job, there is no whatever we are looking for. And we run out of gas. We've come to a screeching halt. And this is the moment that we fear. And certainly the water was bitter. First no water, and then when they find water, the water is bitter. So in the midst of all of what they went through, listen to what God is saying as verse 24, and the people murmured against Moses, what shall we drink? In verse 25, and he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, and which he had cast into the waters made sweet. And he made for them a statute, an ordinance, and there he proved them. I want you to always realize the tree, the cross, makes the biggest difference. When no matter what your situation in life is, no matter what you go through, let the tree come right into the midst of our situation, and suddenly there's a change in equation. Because the cross makes all the difference. It is the greatest divider. It makes the biggest difference. And suddenly the water that was bitter has become sweet and better. How many of us have gone through experiences, even as Ruth's mother-in-law, in the book of Ruth, Naomi? What a fantastic history of her and her family her husband moving down to Moab, and then the children marrying, and then suddenly things begin to happen one after the other. If you want to call it acts, you want to call it witchcraft, want to call it magic, whatever you want to call it, it is certainly not a great blessing. And so here she's taken away of her husband and children and left with 2 daughter-in-laws. And that's the story of a woman whose name she said, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, bitter. I'm bitter. How many are seated here that are bitter and listening to the program that have become bitter because of what happened in their lives? Here is this woman she's crossed over the bridge. She is now of age, but listen, there is a woman with her, a Moabitess, who's looking to see what will happen. And so she's come back to her homeland penniless. But I want you to understand that's not the end of the story. This woman who calls us a Mara, bitter, is the same woman at the close of that chapter taking the child and blessing God, and people call her blessed and say, what a blessing she is. She has become better. She's become sweet because of what takes place. And you need to know the story of Ruth and how she had, even in a time of destitute and a time of not having anything, no husband, nothing, she had to come in a field. And she was a stranger, almost looking for food. And I want you to understand, from one that was seeking bread to one that gives bread later on, to the one that was literally penniless to one that becomes a princess. And I want you to know it was in that moment, as she lay down, she said to this man, cover me, extend the border of your garment. And I want you to know this man did extend the border of his garment, and his name is Boaz, the kinsman. And that's what makes the biggest difference, when our kinsman, our Redeemer, covers us by his blood, covers us by his grace. He takes away our debts, he takes away our loss, he takes away our scandal, he takes away our condemnation, and gives to us his blessing. Glory be to his name. Now I want you to understand that this Mara becomes sweet. But let's go on to verse 27. And they came to Elim, where there was 12 wells or springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there. Isn't it wonderful to come to this oasis in the desert? To come to this place, an awesome place, Elim. But let me just share a secret with you. You will never get to Elim without passing by way of Mara. And understand, in those bitter experiences, you learn to value things that you would have taken for granted, things which would have spoiled you. But they're able to handle Elim because they were able to handle the Mara of their lives. Sometimes we wonder, why not only the good things like Elim in our lives? God has given us, and into our lot we have to accept both the Mara and the Elim. They coming together makes us understand the value of life. If only you had Mara, you would be bitter. If only you had Elim, you would just be so prosperous you don't want God anymore in your life. But thank God for the parcel and the lot of both good and what you call bad. Literally works out for the best for us. For God has allowed all those things because He has some better things for us. These are the things that shapes our lives. These are the things that have experiences and add these some things into our life. Mara and Elim, they are both the component. Don't get stuck in one or the other. Your train will not stay right there. Your train will pass through Mara. Don't get stuck in those places of despondency and pain and hurt. Remember, you are passing through. You're not stuck there. And just in case you think Elim is your final destination and all is about a Cadillac and about a big promotion, all the money, remember this, that's not what you're here for. Thank God for all of this. Paul said, I have learned to be content in whatever state I am, whether to abound or whether to abase. But he said, I can give thanks to God for all things. And we need to learn the situations of our life not to murmur when we go through Mara and not to get spoiled when we go through Elim. Both are necessary for our growth. Give the Lord a clap offering. Now when you go to the second passage, it says, He's a way maker. And that is who He is. I like many titles of God, especially about His name. He is Elohim, the Creator. As you go into the book of Genesis, in the beginning, Elohim, or as the Jewish Elohim, He created the heaven and the earth. But what is so awesome is there's so many names like Adonai and so much of all of that. But when you come to the book of Exodus, the way that God introduces Himself and give Him a calling card to Moses is simply, I am Jehovah. I am who I am. But when you go into an experience of life, and when you realize that God has made a way, you want to add titles to your God. And so in the case of Abraham, God made a way for him where there was no way. And think about this man in Genesis chapter 22 and verse 8. His own son asked him, Father, where is the sacrifice? Deep down in his heart, he knew what he was about to do. But listen, deepest and beyond all of this man said, the Lord will provide. My son, our God will provide. And so He did. And I want you to know, when you turn down to verse 17, there was, before that, a lamb caught in a thicket, and now He calls that name a wonderful name in verse 14. In verse 14, He says, Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh. This is amazing. He added an hyphen to Yahweh, and he called him Jehovah Jireh. God is my provider. So of all the names that we have so many different titles, and people name Him over the experience. Oh, this is so wonderful. Shepherd, a great man who loved the sheep of the people of Israel. But long before, he was taking care of literal sheep, and he understood a shepherd's heart. But he said this of God, the Lord is my shepherd. What more do I need? In other words, that is a title. And I like this title from Isaiah chapter 43 and verse 16. And Isaiah chapter 43 and verse 19. It says, God will make a way. He's a way maker. And that is something we must hold on to, because it's powerful, it's tremendous, it's awesome. That He is a way maker. I want you to know Him. And I want you to know this one who is called a way. In John chapter 14 and verse 6, Jesus introduces Himself. He says, I am the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. He is the way. Moses, his plea, his cry in chapter 33 of book of Exodus is, Lord, show me the way. I like this, what Psalmist says about Him in Psalm 103 and verse 7. He made known His ways to Moses, but His acts to the children of Israel. It's one thing to know the acts and the miracles and the wonders. That is not going to lead you all the way. But Moses knew God's ways. Do you know God's ways? Do you know him who makes a way through every situation where there's no way? When it says no way, God says, I will make a way. Give God all the praise and the worship. This is an incredible God. I want you to realize how powerful it is. When you think of this mighty one that comes to help us, none of us have gone through a situation like Job in the Bible. Well, he was a man that had it all. It rained cats and dogs of misery upon this man who started out so well. And when we come into the middle, he's lost it all. But what kept this man? In Job chapter 23 and verse 10, he makes this profound statement. He says, he knows the way I take, and when I am tried and when I am proved, I shall come forth as fine as gold. In other words, the circumstances of our life, God ordains the steps of people. No mistake about it. All things work together for our good. Even the loss turns out to be gain. But what we see in it is, this man says, he knows, I don't know it all, but he knows the way I take, and when I'm tried, I shall be. And one of the reasons for all of the wilderness and all the waters and all of the fires that come our way is to prove us, and simply means to refine us, that we would come out, the dross knocking out and breaking out, and that it would be, we come out the finest gold. Again, Job begins to talk about his own personal testimony when everything around him, his own body, was peeling off. And think about what he says in Job chapter 19 and verse 25. He says that he will still know that though his body falls apart, that he will see his God. I know my Redeemer liveth, that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. In the next verse 26, and though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh I shall see God. That is awesome. That is wonderful. Asaph is one of the great choir masters of the Israel under King David. And when you look at the great psalm that he has written, it's awesome. Particularly as I read in Psalm 77. That's a great psalm that you could read again and again. It's about his own personal trials and those own personal difficulties that he had to undergo. And listen to what he says. He says, I cried unto the Lord with my voice, even unto God my voice, and he gave ear to me. And he begins to say in verse 9, has God forgotten me? And so has God forgotten to be gracious? Hath he in anger shut up his tender mercies? Just pause and think about this. But I want you to understand, he says something very profound as you go further, particularly when you come to verse 19. He says, thy way is in the sea, and thy path in the great waters, and thy footsteps are not known. Thou leadest thy people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. But listen to what it says in verse 19. Thy way is in the sea, and thy path in the great waters. Thy way in the sea, and that path through the great waters. I don't think you understand what it means. Go back to Moses as he led his people. You see, my friend, God led them into the wilderness. It says simply that. God led them into the wilderness. And it was he who sent them where they were. And now as they come the straight way, they're right there in the midst of terrible dilemma. You see, my friends, when they're stuck there, there's the mountain. It's too big to climb, too steep, and it is dangerous. And then behind them comes what would be an angry Pharaoh and his marching men. They were the finest and the best. They were the greatest generals and the men of that past civilization. You're meeting with the greatest war machine. And just so you can understand, in front of them now is the Red Sea. What would you do in a situation like that? I would say the best thing is, looking at the situation they were in, the best thing to do is let's save the fit and the finest. We may not all escape, but the fit and the finest and the best among us, maybe a few hundreds will escape climbing the ravenous mountains. You don't know how it would be. You don't know how steep it is. It's dangerous. Nobody has done that. But certainly the older, the women, the children, and the vast majority of our people would be slaughtered by Pharaoh. So the chances are that about 3 million people, maybe a few hundreds, perhaps may escape. But let me give you C number 2, which would be even better. Why not we go and put our hands up to Pharaoh, the devil, and say, I give up. Now we are left to the whims and fancies of a capricious enemy. He could do what he wants. He could humiliate us. He could rape the children. He could murder the men. Or he could say, okay, I just need these kids out here. I will take them back and make them like a slave as they have never known before. Or we're willing to do whatever. At least maybe he will keep us alive. At least a dog's life is better than a dead lion. So this is the second scenario. They do not have a third scenario. May I suggest a third scenario? Why not the Red Sea? We would never think of the Red Sea. It's impossible. That is not in anybody's mind. We only have two options. The Red Sea is an impassive. It is impossible. But God says, I will make a way in what is impossible. I don't want you to go back and surrender to Pharaoh and be slaves again. I don't want you to climb that mountain and kill yourselves. But I'm going to make a way through the seas. And so here is a God who says, I will make a way through the seas and my pathway through the mighty waters. I'm going to ask you, my friend, this morning, what is it that's impossible for you? You are looking at all of the possibility as the chess game would, and you're looking and saying, that is impossible, let's not think about it. God says, hold it just a second. I will make a way in that which is impossible. You said, that's an option that's not on the table. I could never finish my PhD. You said I could never be the man that God has given a dream. I could never begin a business. I could never employ 1,000 people. I could never buy a home. I could never do well. I'm past my prime. I will never amount to anything. And God says, try the impossible. I'm going to make you do the impossible, because don't measure by your strength and by your riches. You cannot. But when God comes in, measure it by the riches of the glory and by his power and abundance, far beyond our comprehension and far beyond all that we can think or understand altogether. He is far beyond. And God says, I will do it.